Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So just briefly before we get started, I know most folks on the call have attended some of our previous brown bags, but if you're new to our brown bag seminars, welcome. We are part of the Prevention Research Center network funded by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And it's a group of academic research facilities in the United States that study how people and their communities can avoid or counter the risks for chronic illnesses. And our PRC at Georgia State University is headquartered on the Clarkston campus at Perimeter College, and we work with community organizations, state and local government, residents, and other partners in Clarkston, Georgia to develop, implement, and evaluate culturally and linguistically appropriate interventions to address disparities in the health for migrants and refugees, and to disseminate that work at the community, state, and national level. We are so thrilled this month to have with us one of our COVID ambassadors, which is part of some additional funding we received to increase COVID vaccine confidence in the Clarkston community. And Kaedun Tun is one of those ambassadors, community ambassadors charged with going out into the Clarkston community, answering questions, having real life dialogues with people in the community about their concerns about COVID, about the COVID vaccine. And he's just done tremendous work in that effort. And he is going to be talking to us today about his country of origin and all about Burmese culture, so that we can attempt to better understand Burmese culture and really foster a greater understanding of Burma. So at that, what I'm going to do is share your slides, Kaedun, and then just let me know how I can advance the slides when you're ready.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. Can you see that okay, everybody? Kaedun, look okay to you? Okay, great. Take it away, Kaedun.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Kaedun Tun, and as Dr. Owen Smith mentioned before, I'm one of the community ambassadors for COVID vaccine uptake in Clarkston community for Burmese community. So can you go to the next slide, please? To start my presentation, I would like to give some background on my country. Myanmar, formerly known as Burma, is located in Southeast Asia, and it is a nation full to the brim with a wealth of history and untouched culture to witness. And the main reason it is such a culturally rich part of the world to visit is down to the intricate web of ethnic minorities that are living in Burma. And the country borders 5 different nations of Southeast Asia, such as India, Bangladesh, China, Laos, and Thailand. And these geographical positions have gradually shaped Burma's complex cultural makeup, leading to what is today one of the most ethnically diverse countries in the world. Today, 1/3 of the country's population is made up of minority ethnic community, and it is home to 135 separate ethnic groups that speak over 100 different dialects and languages. And 90% of the country is Buddhist, even though Christianity and Muslims and others are also practiced there. And the country has certainly had a rough journey getting to where it is today because of the civil war and conflicts between ethnic groups and the military regime. And in many places, these conflicts are still ongoing today. Next. So Burma population is estimated to be about 60 million, but because of the seclusion that only ended in 2011, much remain unknown to Burma. And it has been more than 30 years have passed since the last population census. And one of the main factors that influence the population of Burma is migration. Many in Burma has fled the country mainly due to poverty and ongoing civil unrest between ethnic groups and the military regime. And more recently, one being the ethnic cleansing of Rohingyas minority. And in 2009, Thailand, which is the largest destination for Burmese migrants searching for work, has reportedly approximated about 1 million Burmese workers working there. And also approximately about 3 million have fled to other countries as refugees due to ongoing ethnic conflicts. And overall, the country's fertility rates had declined from 6 children per family in 1970 to now 2 children per family in 2013 due to recent democratic transition. Next. Burma has a rich history and is a cultural melting pot of ethnicity, each with their own culture and traditions. It is also known as the Golden Land because of, as you see in the picture on the left, abundant use of gold leaf on its temples and shrines. When you walk the street of Burma, you can't go far without coming across the pagodas glistening with gold, and there's thousands of them spread out throughout the country. The reason is because gold is of huge significance for Burma people of Burma, and it represents the sun, which is associated with qualities such as knowledge and enlightenment. So Burmese Buddhist people make offerings to Buddha by decorating temples throughout the country with gold. And on the right, you will see the ancient city of Bagan, which is designated as one of the UNESCO World Heritage Site to preserve Burma religious architecture. There used to be about over 13,000 temples spread out throughout the city of Bagan, but today only about 2,000 temples remain due to natural disasters throughout the years. And Burma has suffered decades of repressive military rule and has long been isolated from the rest of the world, but it transitioned away from the full military rule starting in 2011, which spurred hopes of democratic reforms, but the military maintained control over much of the government today. Next. For religion, religion is an essential aspect of life in Burma and central to conception of personal identity. 90% of the population is Buddhist. However, there are also significant minorities of Christians and Muslims. Christianity is mainly practiced among ethnic groups such as Karen, Kachin, and Chen. And religion has become a source of deep friction in Burma because religious minority population experience arrest and detention, restriction on religious practices, and various forms of discrimination. And at times, the military sought to widen divides for political purposes by inciting violence among different religious groups. And the recent example of this is the ethnic cleansing of the Rohingyas, who are a small minority Muslim populations, and they are subject to physical abuse, torture, arbitrary arrest and detention. And the government policy restricts their religious practice, marriage, travel, and access to education. And it prevents their employment in the social services. And the Rohingyas are also denied citizenship, meaning anti-discrimination laws does not apply to them. Next. So there are 135 official ethnic groups that are identified as belonging to 8 major categories, which are listed here. These 8 races are divided up not by language or genetic ancestry, but by geography. And there's also a range of other ethnic groups that aren't officially recognized by the government, such as Goroka and the Rohingyas, which make up about 10% of the country's populations. And as I stated before, minority ethnic groups are highly targeted and prosecuted by the military due to religious differences, are considered illegal immigrants by military, making them stateless with no protected rights. And minority groups fear becoming monoculture and struggle to protect their heritage and lands. So over in different regions of the country over the last 60 years or so, many ethnic minorities have tried to achieve independence from the central government, and this struggle is still going in many places. Next. And the main spoken language is Burmese, but each ethnic group speak their own languages. Example, as we've seen in clinics of Karen and Chin. And each ethnic languages, there are also different dialects spoken as well. For example, Chin have different dialects such as Madu, Tidim, Hakka, Zomi, Falam. And even the written languages are different. And here we see on the right, Burmese writing on the top versus Chin Falam language. Therefore, it is important to identify, especially in interpreter situation, to find the right interpreter for those who states that they speak Chin, because Chin has many dialects and each is very different from one another. And as we've seen in clinics, many Chin do tend to speak Burmese, whereas a lot of Karens or Rohingyas don't speak any Burmese at all. Next. Here are some of the portraits of tribal culture in Burma. The first picture is of a Badan woman. They wear heavy ring coil necklaces around their necks, and the wearing of the neck started as a protective shield from tigers, who the villagers thought would attack their necks, but attack them by biting their necks. But over time, the shield transformed into a sign of beauty, and now they believe that the longer the neck, the more beautiful the woman is. And the second picture is of a woman from Chin tribe with facial tattoo covering the face. And the face tattoo started as the villagers' attempt to make the young girls in the village undesirable to the outsiders from forcefully stealing and marrying the girls before they're of age. And each area of Chin State has distinct tattoo patterns, so it is usually possible to determine where a woman comes from by the look of the tattoo on her face. And last picture show Aka tribe woman wearing silver head cap, which reflects wealth and beauty. And notice that her teeth are black, which is due to chewing betel nut, which is widely popular throughout Burma. Next. So Kun-Ya, which is the name that we call in Burma, which is the chewing of areca nuts, which dates back centuries. And almost every street corner in Burma has a stall selling Kun-Ya. And traditional sort of is a stimulating chewing gum. It's made with areca nut, betel leaves, dried tobacco leaves, and slake lime paste, as you see at the picture below. That remains very much in fashion despite health concerns. In Burma, it is popular among drivers who use them to stay alert on the road. It is cheap and easily accessible, therefore more people consume it compared to cigarettes or alcohol. And when chewed, it produces dark red dye, which you can see in the picture, that stain the teeth over time and can also cause variety of mouth cancers. And the areca nut, which is the main ingredients in there, is the fruit of local type of palm tree, and it causes a slight euphoric effect and relaxation, which is in a similar way, very similar to what nicotine does to your body. Next. Thanaka, which is another very popular Burmese practices. It doesn't matter what age or gender you are in Burma, everybody wears Thanaka. Sometimes you will see some refugee who's recently arrived in the US wear Thanaka. It is applied on the face, arms, and legs, and it is widely used in Burma for all ages because of it produces a cooling effects on the skin, and it offers protection from the sun, especially for those who work outdoors. And because Burma is in the tropical climate zone, the temperature remains pretty hot throughout the year. And it is a gold paste cream made by grinding the bark, wood, or roots of the Thanaka tree with a small amount of water on a circular slate lab, as you can see in the picture below. It is also, it has medicinal purposes and used to control acne and also used to treat wounds and rashes in the remote villages. Next. Healthcare in Burma is mainly privately funded, and it is underfinanced, resulting in shorter life expectancy. And growth efforts in Burma are up to a slow start, beginning under a dictatorship for so long. And healthcare system has been neglected by the government in the past 50 years, and access to care is a huge challenge, particularly for those in rural areas and remote countries, which accounts for approximately 70% of the Burma's population. And they lack adequate health knowledge, access to providers, and reliable electricity supply, which is essential for the operation of medical equipment and storage of vaccines and medicines. And also in the border states, where access to healthcare services is poor or has been disrupted by armed conflicts and forced displacement, they have higher rate malaria and mortality rates. Malaria, AIDS, and malnutrition are serious problems in Burma, but the country gets minimal foreign assistance because of its repressive regime. And Burma tuberculosis rate is one of the highest in the world. And in Burma, people tend to not seek out preventative care due to lack of access, education, and money. Therefore, continuous education to get routine health checks and seeking preventative care is encouraged when they come to the United States. And mental health, which is a very stigmatized topic in Burma. It has long been neglected issue. And stigma and cultural understanding plays key issues when it comes to mental health. And even though that is the case, many who are coming to the US have experienced trauma directly or indirectly due to running from decades of conflicts and civil wars throughout the country. And recent military coup that was in 2021, which resulted in violent crackdown throughout the region, will have and continue to have significant impact on citizen mental health well-being. So push for seeking out mental health services and creating conversation around mental health is highly recommendable, especially for those who have settled in the United States. And health crisis arising from the military takeover is affecting the entire country right now. And the country's health infrastructure is in the brink of collapse. And that is on top of ongoing COVID-19 pandemic response, as well as protected emergency in areas of the country with humanitarian needs. And a lot of, Burmese community respond to vaccines. It is correlated with how the behaviors of like our relatives back home. For example, like, at first they were hesitant to take the vaccines, but during the Delta waves, a lot of the people back home were infected, or a lot of us has family who has died. So after the Delta wave, there was like an increased uptake in vaccine uptakes in United States. So a lot of it, the way they respond about COVID back home is translated to how the refugee community from Burma respond to COVID here. Next. And here are some of the recent events that have been taking place in the country. As a lot of you might know, Rohingya genocide, which began in 2017, and which is still ongoing, where the military carried out widespread systematic attack on Rohingya Muslim, which sent hundreds of thousands fleeing across the border into Bangladesh. And the military carried out mass killings, rapes, genocidal intent, and hundreds of Rohingya villages were burned. And in 2019, Bangladesh announced it will no longer accept Rohingyas fleeing Burma. And for the second part, the military coup, which happened in February of 2022, it started when the military junta overthrew the democratic government, claiming that the recent election results were fraudulent, and they detained the elected leaders and went after those who show opposition to the junta rule, such as writers, activists, and even healthcare workers, which right now limit access to a lot of people who are seeking care in the country, because a lot of the well-known doctors and healthcare workers are basically running from the military and the soldiers, because they're actively being hunted down, because they are participating in the opposition to the campaigns that are opposed to the military regime. And the opposition activists have formed the Campaign for Civil Disobedience movement and have helped organize strikes and mass protests. What started out as civil disobedience has now turned into essentially a civil war across Burma. And each day violence is escalating, especially in the regions where ethnic minority lives. And the ongoing conflict in the region has intensified on top of already ongoing refugee crisis the country is facing. So, every time a similar thing happened back in 1988, but every time it happens, the people who seem to suffer the most are the ethnic minorities who are living in different regions like Karen, Chin, Kachin. A lot of, they are hit with heavy weapons, big weapons every single day. And a lot of them are right now become IDPs, and which are like gonna become stateless, like in a few years. So next. So that's on a brief overview of Burmese culture and what's been happening in Burma. And because of the current events, I know it will be a long fight, but we're optimistic that we can bring peace within the country. So senseless killings and ethnic cleansing can stop, and that future generation of Burma have a chance at a better life. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that helpful overview, Kaedun. So we'll open it up for just questions and discussion. As a mental health researcher, I want to just start with a question to follow up on a comment you made on one of the earlier slides about mental health related stigma. And would love to hear you say more about that and kind of the culture around mental health issues and seeking mental health care, and also what strategies you think might help address those challenges related to increasing mental health care seeking behavior. What kinds of things might work with populations in your experience that identify as Burmese?
For Burma, similar to a lot of Asian culture, people are very hesitant to talk about mental health because back home, mental health services are basically non-existent. And a lot of the times, people associate mental health as being crazy or like possessed by an outer force, rather than it's an actual condition that you can seek help for. So that is and a lot of the people, especially the older generation, have a negative view about mental health or seeking mental health services they just basically ignore it and basically like think of it as a phase that you will eventually like, get over it or like deal with it. So a lot of the people who actually like, seek out mental health services and medication because they cannot cope with just regular methods, who have schizophrenia and things like that. So they are very like, they face like, shameful comments from the community and even the families. And it's just overall a very like negative, toxic environment. So for the most part, what I've seen that help is like, a lot of education, reaching out through trusted like community members or even like, religious figures in the country. It might be like, double-edged sword, like reaching out to a religious figure because sometimes they themselves are a part of like older generation doesn't really want to address mental health issues. So I think the best way I could think of is like opening up conversation and making them having access and making it easier for them to having access to mental health services will be the best reach to the population.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. Other questions? Feel free to just chime in or you can drop anything in the chat. Michael?
Thank you, Kaedun. That was great. Can you talk a little bit about the Burmese community in Clarkston and what your observations about similarities and differences to other prominent refugee communities in Clarkston from, whether Congolese or Somalian or others, and what have you observed in your vaccine work that differentiates Burmese from other groups?
I think for the most part, a lot of the Burmese community are willing to take the vaccine, especially after the Delta wave happened, like as mentioned before, for the second time. And, similar to like different communities here, like, Somali, Congolese, Facebook is widely used back home and is also widely used over here. So a lot of the information is shared through Facebook. So in that case, a lot of the misinformation they were receiving is through Facebook for the most part. So us having been able to like go out to the community, which is very similar to other other communities like Congolese community, different vaccine drives that we did at, locations that it's easily accessible for them. Just like, going out into like different plaza, talking to them, having a conversation with different community members, showing them and talking to them what services are available for them as far as like COVID vaccine has really helped. And also for Burmese community, incentives have helped a lot because every time I send out information on vaccine drives and, there's an incentive involved, there's a lot more community members who are willing to come to those drives and, diapers and things like that. So if something's being given out, then they're like more likely to come. But for the most part, I think as far as like COVID is concerned, they are open to listening. Right now, our challenge is like reaching to the age group around 40 to 55 years old who hasn't been vaccinated. And it's going to be like a big uphill battle because if they hasn't been vaccinated now, it's going to be really hard for them to convince them to get vaccinated. So a lot of things that works for other community has worked for Burmese community. So it overlaps for the most part.
Great, thank you.
Other questions? Kaedun, can you talk a little bit more about the military takeover in 2021? And I know you're not a policy or international policy person, but I would love to hear a little bit more about kind of more than kind of what we usually get, which is like headlines in the news, like what was happening, what's still happening in the country, what impact is that having both on the health of the residents in the country, as well as people who are here who have family back home. Can you give us a little bit more of a more nuanced picture of kind of what was happening politically and then what the consequences are for the people there?
So what happened was because of due to the election. So basically it all started because basically if the military lose power this time around, then they're able to like the democratic government, which it was in place, will be able to like, implement policies that will literally like drastic, cut down like, drastic money incoming the military is receiving from all like, the corruptions that they've been doing for over the years. So that's how it started. And so right now, it's escalating every day to the fact that like, in regions like Karen, Kachin, Rohingyas, in all the main, ethnic communities who has been having like ongoing civil wars for the past 50 plus years. So they get like basically the worst of the deal, more so than the people who are in the capital. So right now, a lot of the people participated in the civil disobedience movement, which includes doctors, politicals, writers, politicians, and things like that. So they're basically going after them, targeting them, which makes it very hard for healthcare workers to even be in the hospital in the midst of COVID pandemic, because a lot of the people I know, like a lot of my friends who are doctors, they have to hide away for like 2 months, 3 months from the military trying to find them because, they got information that they are opposed and they're like, not going to, governmental jobs. Showing like, they're opposed to military takeover during this time. So there is, that's why right now, even the health situation, the military situation, the policy situation is not really ideal right now. And I feel like since it's escalating day by day, there's more arrests that is being made. There's a lot more people who are targeted, who are like fleeing through Thai borders, who are not necessarily even a part of the ethnic groups, that they're coming through Thailand and, like trying to seek shelters, because if they don't leave, then basically they're gonna get captured, tortured, or like killed, which happened to a lot of the people who are openly opposed, with the military. And, right now, a lot of the ethnic groups do have their own like, army sort of. So they are defending the military, the ethnic groups that are highly targeted, but the power, the percentage is just like very small compared to the power that the military regime has. So even though they're defending, not a lot has like, improved, and they're still getting shelled every day. So a lot more like I'm assuming like, in a couple of years or months, there will be an uptake in the refugee incoming that are from Burma. Even if they're not incoming to the United States, they are certainly going to Thailand, India, and China bordering countries.
Thanks. Tom and then Michael.
Sure. Hi, Kaedun. Question, like going kind of off of what you were just talking about, what would you suggest for us trying to support the Burmese community, both here in Georgia and then those who are still in Burma? Like, is there anything that we can be doing for the Clarkston community particularly? And then, are there any organizations you suggest for, sending money, resources, even just sharing awareness? What do you think?
I think sharing awareness, in social media helps the most, because they are different small groups that are, like doing their part, basically, whether it's like, sending medical supplies, sending donations to the IDPs that are in crime borders, tin borders. So, for the people in here to basically kind of like, give them like moral support and essentially like letting them know that you're there for them, and like, having them like, get access to care, mental health services and things like that, because even if they're not openly talking about it, a lot of them experience like, tremendous amount of trauma and pain running back home. So and then there's like other organizations that you can get involved, like, Partners in Health, or like this big organization that is over in Minnesota, that's like recently go like every 6 months to the borders, IDPs, sending out donations and supplies and things like that, because they have opened up recently to the, international aid, like in big organizations like Red Cross, UNICEF, and things like that. But a lot of the donations are like kind of interrupted by the military before even get to places. So that's one thing to consider, So I think it's more effective like going through smaller organizations that have like people on the ground who's already supporting them, rather than going through like big organizations.
Thank you.
Michael?
We've had a number of Burmese Fulbright students over the years at Georgia State, and I've gotten to know them well and really have enjoyed meeting them. And, they strike me as very peaceful, thoughtful, considerate people, and 90% of the population, you said, is Buddhist. And then it's such a contrast, I think, that it's a repressive regime, military, all this persecution of the Rohingya. And to me, it's just this conflict of a peaceful nation, Buddhist religion dominant, but at the same time, this repressive regime and military conflict and persecution of certain populations that it's hard to, and I don't know if they're considered to be vulnerable or what, but can you comment at all your perspective? I mean, to the extent you're comfortable doing that, and then after that, if you could just say a word about your own journey, how you wound up in Clarkston, and what it's been like for you, kind of a personal perspective.
So for the first part, I think the peacefulness that you see for the most part from people coming on Burma is because of the Buddhism practices that is very instilled in their lives. So even though they have flee tremendous amount of trauma, repressive military regimes, I think over in the end, their religious practices kind of overrule everything that they experience. So for the most part, they come up peaceful. And until recently, 2015, the country was very much shut down from the outside world. So a lot of the people that are in the countries, even though there were ongoing ethnic conflicts, a lot of people are not aware of it due to the military propaganda and the military agenda basically kind of brainwash a lot of people. Because even with me, what happened with the Rohingyas, what I was hearing when it started was very different from what the journey I go through to learn about what actually happening. Because a lot of the people back home thought that it was it was because they did something so that the military went after it, but it was total opposite of what's happening. So I think a lot of the time is their religion overrules, and Christianity, of course, and Buddhism also overrules all the pain and trauma that they experience. So that's why. And then Burmese people are a lot friendly, always for all the time smiling whenever if you've been to Burma, you'll see that everybody is very helpful and very friendly for everybody. So, and for my journey, I came to United States back in 2007, and even though I came here as a refugee, my family kind of took a different route. So we came from the capital. Even though my tribe, we're Karens, we're also a very highly prostituted tribe. We didn't went through camps, through Karen camps, but we came through the capital, came here, adjusting to United States, and it was very hard. Trying to learn the ropes of growing up here, especially being the oldest of the family. My dad was here for a couple of years before us, but that certainly helps. And how I ended up in Clarkston, because we used to live in Avondale, and then my family, which my parents are very involved in the church with the Clarkston community, with a lot of, because they speak fluent Karen, so they're always in the community helping out. And then I just kind of shift from that helping when I graduated high school and college, and continue helping with the Karen community and the Chin community. So since I speak Burmese fluently, and I can also read and write, it's very easy for me to reach out to the community and help the community, because of that language barrier is not there, And for the Quran, I try my best to reach to them, but if not, my parents certainly helps. And, all my connections I make, like, Chin community and the Rangers community. And I understand, like, sometimes there are certain communities, because of what happened back home, are hesitant to talk to me or to anybody of like different tribes. But, we're still, it's an ongoing process. So.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that, Kaedun, which is a naive question, but just about, whether being here, do you still see that there are challenges talking to other Burmese subgroups, subpopulations, depending on your specific kind of subgroup or your ethnicity within Myanmar? Like, do you see that play out in the US? And it sounds like you do.
Yeah, certainly, because I feel like without my parents' connection, to be honest, I feel like it would be really hard for me to reach into the Korean community without me really speaking the language, because out of all the groups, Koreans and the Burmese military, that's the longest ongoing civil war. So a lot of the Korean people, even though they understand and speak Burmese, who are from like in the city, they just refuse to speak it because of what happened to their families back home, which is very understandable. And and then recently for Chin, for the most part, there's not a lot of like tension being placed with Koreans and Chins. Is more so like the military. And if you recognize that, because they do like to name themselves as Burmese military, so whenever you're approaching the other ethnic groups, they think you're Burmese, even though you're coming from other different ethnic groups that just happen to speak Burmese. So after if you have the conversation, they're open to talking to you. But one of the community that I still have, which is understandably so, I have a challenge, reaching out in Rohingyas community. But I understand, because of like what happened. It's just very hard for them to like have an open dialogue conversation with people who are from Burma. So yeah, and there's a lot of like education that still need to happen for people who left Burma and who are still in Burma about the situation that are happening with Rohingyas. So yeah, so even me, I'm still learning. So
yeah, that's all really important information for us to keep thinking about as we do work in the community. Thinking about the dynamics between the different groups, and it sounds like how strongly some individuals might react to certain languages is really important for us to be cognizant about. Yeah, Michael.
Yes, Kaedun, sorry to ask all these questions, but since we have you, this is not a Burmese question per se, but if you could talk to us a little bit about what it's been like for you being a refugee in Clarkston, and what your experience has been, and how you see Clarkston as a community for refugees, the challenges or the strengths of it, and feel free to be candid. It's a small group on the online here, but what's your personal experience been? I know you went to Georgia State, got your degree, but I'm sure it's not been easy. And so share with us a little bit about the refugee experience.
So being a refugee in Clarkston certainly has a lot of like positive impacts, being that there are a lot of also other refugees who can relate to you. And I feel like compared to like other places, who I have friends in other areas of the country who don't really have that much diverse of a population, have a harder time adjusting to the life in the United States. So being around a lot of other cultures, other refugees from different countries, trying to like adjust life in the United States has certainly helped. So my experience in the Clarkston has, for the most part, is very positive. And I feel like in Clarkston, one thing is that, if you need help, the access to help is not far away. Whereas like, for a lot of the community, like even like having access to like different health information, things like that in different languages is very hard to obtain. Whereas like, in Clarkston, grow tremendously like over the years since when I've been here, and even now I feel like there's a lot of efforts in the community who are like trying to improve like health education in the community and increasing like COVID-19 uptakes, things like that, and being able to like I think Clarkston does a good job just have giving refugees access, and I think that's and they're showing us like the ropes or how to navigate the different like healthcare systems that are in the United States. So it's been very helpful because for the most part everybody is very helpful, very accessible, and having like clinics like Grace Clinic, Ethnic Clinic nearby is very easy for a lot of the refugees like seeking healthcare because compared to back home, like I was mentioning, we don't really seek preventative healthcare. That's why it's really hard for healthcare providers to even talk about like diabetes prevention, hypertension prevention, and things like that to the Burmese community. So being able, having them access, having like diabetes medication, somebody who speak their language, explaining to them different health information has certainly helped. So I was lucky. I was one of the lucky ones who ended up being in Clarkston and being able to be around Clarkston. So I think for the most part, it's been very, very, rewarding experience overall for me.
Thank you. And what about how about the greatest challenge?
Yeah, so the greatest challenge being in Clarkston, I guess, working in the Clarkston would be trying to push for having conversation on mental health, because right after the coup, I'm also involved with like other organization, the small organization, trying to like bring bring access to CDMers who are the people who are fleeing the military right now in the border of Thailand. So opening up conversation about mental health has been the biggest challenge, because I know there is need. I mean, we all know there's a need, but it's just that people are not willing to talk about it. And it's been so long to, if you can't keep like repressing all these emotions and trauma, you have to find a way to process it. So that would be the biggest challenge, and I hope to see that year after years and years, like hopefully the topic on mental health improve and a lot more people are open to having the conversation. So since a lot more people will be like fleeing, coming to the United States with the recent military coup. So
Yeah, Saja.
Yeah, since we're talking about mental health and how that's, there needs to be better communication about it in the community and stuff like that. I was just wondering, Kaedun, if you had any suggestions on, I guess, the language surrounding mental health, if you think that there is like a better word or phrase that might like appeal to the Burmese community.
I think as far as like wording goes, to kind of like use words that might not necessarily suggest like mental health in like a direct sense, because I feel like people shy away from it. Let's say if you say, oh, do you want to talk about how your like your mental health is, like just like kind of like change up the wording a little bit to be like more approachable when you're like approaching different community members. And I feel like reaching talking to like, so we're trying to like talk to like more women in the community to try to see like what's their kind of like perspective on how to approach the community members on mental health. Because if you can convince a woman in the Burmese community, I feel like it will be easier for to reach into the men and even to the kids and for the rest of the community. So that's one of the things that we've been trying with my other organizations, and just being able to like have them like connect with providers who also like speak Burmese, or who are able to have like translation available when we are holding like conversation, like having talks, open discussions and things like that. So yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's really interesting, especially the point that you brought up about kind of the women being kind of the source of information for the rest of the community.
Yeah, women and the younger generation. So that will be, the younger kids around like the 20s, teenagers. So
Awesome.
they can like forward the information to the parents.
Just to follow up on that, Kaedun, you said kind of using different wording. Are you thinking about kind of like more holistic wording, like talking about like wellness, or thinking about like the mind-body connection, or like what kinds of words or language do you feel would be more accessible when talking about that?
Yeah, I think I was thinking about more holistic, wording that kind of like don't just single out mental health, so that they won't be hesitant to come if you do decide to like hold discussions. So just like well-being, anything, more holistic wording would be very impactful, I think, because I feel like if you just say mental health topic, I feel like less people will come or even would be interested in talking about it. So
It's definitely not specific to Burmese culture. I think that issue is.
So, Kaedun, my last question, promise, is, will you go back to Burma at any point, or as a refugee, are you restricted in your ability to do that?
Yes, I would definitely go back to Burma if I have a chance. So I went back 2 times previously. The last time I went back was 2019, right before the military coup happened. So right now, I can't go back being the United States citizen. They won't give you visas to even go in there. So the only way for me to even go back is if I cross the border from Thailand. But yes, I would definitely go back because I feel like a lot more work needs to be done in Burma, and it's just a lot more improvements that I would like to help out. And hopefully, the country will open up, and so.
Thanks, Kaedun. Maybe we'll leave it there unless there are any other questions. Okay. So just a reminder all to visit our website for the recording from today. Please feel free to share it with others. Email me with any additional questions or comments. And also you can email prc@gsu.edu to be added to the brown bag listserv. So I just want to thank Kaedun so much for his time today, his insights into Burmese culture. I can say personally, this was really interesting and valuable to hear what you had to say today, Kaedun. It's so much, has such a greater impact than, reading newspaper articles about what's going on in Burma. And just to hear a very personal perspective, I think is of such value. And we really appreciate your time today. And we really appreciate all the hard work you're doing as a COVID ambassador in the community. I know you're making such a big difference, and we're just really grateful. So thank you all for your time, and thank you to Kaedun.
Thank you.